Coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, the deadline for the Raiders and Josh Jacobs to come up with that contract extension, well, it came and went. No extension was done. So what's next for the league's leading rusher? We'll talk about that plus a whole lot more coming up on Tuesday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, July 18th, 2023.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won, and won, and won, and won, and won.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts to get the latest edition of the show. Of course, if you're checking us out on YouTube, many thanks to you. We definitely appreciate you. Without you, there is no us. There is no show. There is no YouTube. There is no podcast. So we definitely appreciate you, Raider Nation, for rocking with us not only throughout the course of the season, but the offseason as well, as we're getting closer and closer to training camp. And many thanks to my man, Ari, who makes sure that we're up on YouTube looking good and sounding good each and every day. You can check him out on Twitter if you choose to, at Ari Produces. You can hit me up on Twitter as well, at your boy Q254. And of course, we got that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Lots of calls and texts to get through in segment number 3. And of course, the majority of them about Josh Jacobs and the contract situation going on with the Silver and Black. Coming up in segment number 2, there's a graphic that's floating around Twitter right now, and I know it's a fact that the running backs that have been winning Super Bowls as of late, and I think this goes all the way back to 2009, have not been the high-priced running back. And that's a fact. But there is something I'd like to point out about this graphic, and we'll bring that up in segment number 2, talk about it, and break it down. Here in segment number 1, as you can imagine, news and notes of the day, and a lot of it has to do, matter of fact, most of it, if not all of it, has to do with running back Josh Jacobs. So let's go ahead and get right into it. And as you know by now, Josh Jacobs and the Raiders were not able to come to an agreement on a contract extension, something that I think a lot of us expected was going to be the case. I was hoping, as a fan of the player, a fan of the team, obviously, but as a fan of the player, I was hoping it was going to get done, especially after what Josh Jacobs did in 2022. I was hoping they were going to come to some kind of middle agreement. Never did I think that the Raiders were going to try to reset the running back market, and I don't think Josh Jacobs expected them to reset the running back market, but obviously wanted a little bit of more security than what the Raiders were offering, and I don't have any kind of idea what the Raiders were offering. I don't have any kind of idea what Josh Jacobs was expecting. I just saw what he said on Twitter, that they weren't trying to reset the market, but they were looking for a little bit of security. That was something that he mentioned to Kenny King on Twitter when Kenny had mentioned about resetting the market. So that was something that Josh Jacobs said on Twitter, but apparently, according to multiple people, it got close. It got really close. I've been told by plenty of people locally that the deal almost got done, and the fact that Josh Jacobs was spotted around the facility on Monday lets it be known that he was there willing to sign that contract if it came to that. Obviously, it never did. Matter of fact, take it a step further, Tom Pelissero from NFL Network talked about just how close it was and exactly where Josh Jacobs was when that deadline passed.
It was a very short negotiation. There really wasn't a lot of activity. Even this morning, there wasn't optimism that anything would get done. But this is how close it was. I am told that Josh Jacobs drove his car to the Raiders facility, was sitting in it with teammate Max Crosby at the deadline in case something came together. Obviously, that did not end up happening. And now it remains to be seen when or even if Josh Jacobs will be back at the Raiders facility again. Much like Saquon Barkley, no expectation that he shows up at the start of training camp. The next checkpoint is going to be week 1. That's still a long ways off.
So there you go. A couple things right there. I love the fact that Josh Jacobs was there in the facility or at the facility in his car. I love the fact that Max Crosby was with him. Max Crosby, obviously the leader, the face of the franchise right now. I know Devontae Adams is really a big-time, face of the franchise as well, but Max Crosby is the homegrown dude, along with Josh Jacobs. Max Crosby's already got his contract extension, so to see him there supporting his guy, there in the car waiting for him, hoping that they get that call saying, hey, run up here and sign your contract extension, I think that that's really cool. And I also think that it's a lot closer than many people believe that it was going to be. Vinny Bonsignore from the RJ, the Las Vegas Review Review-Journal. Of course, he's on Raider Nation Radio 920 as well, put out a piece that's saying basically, hey, it was really close, and maybe that's a good sign for next offseason. Obviously, Josh Jacobs has to wait till next offseason to be able to sign a contract extension if he does choose to play with the Raiders, and I do expect him to play. I do expect him to show up for Week 1. I don't expect to see him at all in training camp, but I do expect him to be there ready for Week 1 when the Raiders travel to Denver to take on the Broncos. It's going to be $10 million fully guaranteed, which is $2 million more than he would have made on the fifth-year option. It's nothing to shake a stick at, but clearly it's not the money that he was looking for, and it's not the security that he was looking for. So, again, love the fact that Max Crosby was there supporting his guy, and Max Crosby's got a ton of respect for Josh Jacobs. I also love the fact that other running backs around the league were there supporting their guys. And when I'm talking about their guys, I'm talking about Josh Jacobs. I'm talking about Saquon Barkley, talking about Tony Pollard. All three of those running backs, they all had the franchise tag, and none of them got a deal done. Tony Pollard was not a guy that I was surprised by. Actually, he signed his contract, his franchise tag immediately for $10 million. But remember, this is a former fourth-round pick that doesn't have a whole lot of burn. He's coming off of an injury. So, yeah, he signed it immediately because he's never made $10 million, right? So, of course, he wanted to get the long-term deal done, but he's also going to be happy riding out that franchise tag. And I kind of thought that's how it was going to play out anyway with him. I felt like the Cowboys were pretty comfortable with just giving him the one-year, $10 million deal after they gave the long-term deal to Zeke Elliott. And, well, we all know how that played out. But other running backs around the league supporting Jacobs, Barkley, and Pollard, King Henry, Derrick Henry, he said, at this point, just take the running back position out the game then. The ones that want to be great and work as hard as they can to give all to their organization just seems like it don't even matter. I'm with every running back that's fighting to get what they deserve. Austin Eckler, who, remember, asked for a trade from the Chargers and then finally got a little bit of a boost in his contract, not much, like $1 million, $1.5 million, whatever the case may be, gave a little bit of contract bump, but not really. He said, this is the kind of trash that has artificially devalued one of the most important positions in the game. Everyone knows it's tough to win without a top running back, and yet they act like we're discardable widgets. I support any running back doing whatever it takes to get his bag. Najee Harris of the Pittsburgh Steelers, he goes on, I agree with my running back brothers around the NFL. History will show that you need running backs to win. We set the tone every game and run through walls for our team and lead in many ways. This notion that we deserve less is a joke. Christian McCaffrey weighed in. Other running backs around the league weighed in as well. And look, again, I've said it so many times, and I said it on Raider Nation Radio 920 on Monday. This is not a Raiders thing. I know there's a lot of fans that are angry at the Raiders for not getting this deal done and think it's Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels' fault that, it didn't get done. It's not a Raiders thing. It's not a Giants thing. It's not a Cowboys thing. It's not any of those. It's the NFL situation and where they're at right now with the value of running backs, and I believe that the system is broken. I believe something needs to be done so running backs can be compensated for what they've earned, right? And not being treated like they're being treated right now. Right now, the state of the running back position is not in a good place. Ari Mayrob from 33rdteam.com, he put out on Twitter on Monday, veteran running backs this offseason. I believe this tells you all you need to know about the running back position. Guys that took pay cuts, Joe Mixon and Aaron Jones. Guys that got cut, Zeke Elliott, Dalvin Cook, Leonard Fournette. Guys that got tagged but no deal, Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard. Wanted a new deal and asked for a trade, Austin Eckler, and has been a free agent all offseason long, Kareem Hunt. All those are veteran running backs that their whole situation was up in limbo all offseason long. So there's that. That's another state of the situation, the running back position. How about this? And this is from Jeff Darlington on Twitter, and again, tells you all you need to know about the running back position in 2023. The cost of franchise tag running backs is just so low for teams to pass up. Consider this. The quarterback tag in 2015 was at $18.5 million. It's now at $32.4 million. The wide receiver tag in 2015 was $12.8 million, now $19.7 million. The running back tag in 2015, $10.9 million, now $10.1 million. While all other tags prices have risen, the running back tag has gone down. Again, tells you all you need to know about the running back position and the value of it in 2023. Again, not a Raiders thing, not a Giants thing, not a Cowboys thing. It's an NFL thing. It is something that needs to be addressed. The NFLPA needs to do better by their running backs, in my opinion. And look, I get it. It's a business situation. You know, it's like they say in New Jack City. My man Freddie Coleman says it all the time. It's nothing personal. It's just business, B. I do feel encouraged that Josh Jacobs was at least in the parking lot, ready to go sign his deal. So I feel like at least the fact that, you know, they were negotiating and it probably seemed like it was going to get done or closer to getting done. That's why he was there available. I think that that's good. And hopefully that doesn't leave a bad taste in his mouth. I don't know that. Haven't talked to him, so I can't tell you where he's at right now. But I do expect to see him week 1 when the season gets started and the game checks are there, because you don't get paid during training camp. So why is he going to show up in training camp? I expect him to be there ready for week 1. He's not going to pass up on $10 million. I just don't see that happening. But coming up in segment number 2, going to talk about Super Bowl winning running backs and the argument that's made not to pay these guys their net worth because of these guys that have won the Super Bowl since 2009. And I'll tell you why, yes, it's a fact, but it's also something else I have to think about. That's all coming up in segment number 2 after I tell you about the title sponsor of today's show, which is FanDuel. And right now we want you to take your first swing at betting Major League Baseball on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line, the over-under, who you think is going to hit the first home run, the first 5 innings, stolen bases, total bases in a game. It's all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on Major League Baseball than FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to talk about Super Bowl winning running backs and the argument that, well, the last guy that got a lot of money that was a running back did not help their team get to the Super Bowl. Matter of fact, all the guys that have gotten a lot of money have never helped their team get to the Super Bowl since 2009. So I have some numbers here, and I had there's a few graphics that are floating around Twitter right now. I've actually had a couple people tweet them at me just to let me know this is why the Raiders didn't sign Josh Jacobs to their contract extension. So I'll go ahead and go through these really fast. 2009, the Saints won the Super Bowl. Pierre Thomas was their leading rusher, $460,000. In 2010, the Packers, James Starks, $320,000. 2011, the Giants, Ahmad Bradshaw, $1.5 million. 2012, the Ravens with Ray Rice, $2 million. 2013, Seahawks with Percy Harvin, $2.5 million. 2014, Patriots with LeGarrette Blount, $730,000. 2015, the Broncos with C.J. Anderson, $585,000. 2016, the Patriots with LeGarrette Blount, $760,000. 2017, the Eagles with LeGarrette Blount, $900,000. 2018, the Patriots, Sony Michel, $480,000. 2019, the Chiefs with Damian Williams, $1.05 million. 2020, Buccaneers, Leonard Fournette, $2 million. 2021, Rams, Cam Akers, $890,000. And then 2022, the Chiefs had Isaiah Pacheco, $870,000. So it's funny. I mentioned that stat on ESPN Radio on Monday night. I was holding it down on Freddie and Fitzsimmons with my guy Emmett Golden from ESPN Cleveland, who does a fantastic job. And I read that off to him, and I said, what does that mean to you? And he said, well, first of all, Q, what that means is all those teams had elite quarterbacks for the most part, right? And I was like, that's a good point, because everyone's been saying there's been no big-time elite running backs that have gotten to the Super Bowl or led their team to the Super Bowl and won it. Like, every time I talk about the running back position and the value of it, everyone always says, well, yeah, when's the last time an elite running back got their team to the Super Bowl? Well, elite quarterbacks did. And so I look at it like, okay, if you don't have an elite running back, you better have that elite quarterback. And for the most part, all these teams did. Now, there's a couple exceptions to it. Saints had Drew Brees. Packers had Aaron Rodgers. Giants had Eli Manning. Ravens, Joe Flacco. Obviously not elite. Seahawks had Russell Wilson. And you can say what you want about Russell Wilson, but at that time, he was a really good quarterback. Of course, the Seahawks had a different dynamic of a team. They were led by defense, the running game, and what's, so forth and so what, whatever the case may be. It was Russell Wilson. Patriots, Tom Brady, no-brainer. Broncos, Peyton Manning, no-brainer. Again, Patriots, Tom Brady. Eagles, now this is obviously not an elite quarterback, Nick Foles, right? But they, again, were led by a very strong defense and a very strong run game, but it was LeGarrette Blount was their lead back, right? Now they had multiple backs, though. Patriots, Tom Brady. Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes. Buccaneers, Tom Brady. Rams, here you go. This was, who was this? Matt Stafford. I don't think at any cost he's elite, but had a strong defense and a good, well, just a good nucleus of a team. And Chiefs in 2022, Patrick Mahomes. So what? One team, two teams, 3 teams out of all those don't have elite quarterbacks. And so they had to lean heavily on the run game and their defense. Now, you look at the Raiders, and you can even look at the Giants for this. They don't have an elite quarterback. Jimmy G is nowhere close to an elite quarterback. He's a mid-range quarterback, and he's probably a little bit less than Derek Carr was. So what do they need? They need a strong run game with a strong running back. Now, not saying that they can't get it done with Zamir White and Brandon Bolden and, anyone else that's in the mix, Britton Brown, Amir Abdullah, whatever the case may be. I'm not saying that they can't get it done with that, but when you have a quarterback like Jimmy G, you really do need to rely heavily on that guy you can count on, that running back that you know. And look, in 2022, Derrick Henry was the number 1 guy from scrimmage for the Tennessee Titans. He had 36. He was responsible for 36% of the scrimmage yards for the Tennessee Titans. He was number 1 in the league. Who was number 2? Josh Jacobs with 33% of scrimmage yards for the Silver and Black. Derrick Henry is the 169th highest paid player in the NFL. That's wild, right? I don't know 168 players that are better than Derrick Henry, but I get it. Again, because it's the running back position, so it's just different. And, Josh Jacobs is going to get paid $10 million, and he's not even, and Saquon Barkley and Tony Pollard, they're not even in the top 5 as far as running backs with pay this year. Matter of fact, the number 1 running back as far as pay goes this year is going to be a guy who's never taken a snap in the NFL, and Bijan Robinson, obviously being drafted number 8 overall. He's going to get that higher rookie contract. So he's getting $13 million this year. Christian McCaffrey's at, I believe, $12 million. You have guys like Aaron Jones, Alvin Kamara that's around. Kamara's at 11. Aaron Jones is at 10.9. I believe Nick Chubb is at 10.9. So, I mean, just, and they'll slot in. Josh Jacobs and Saquon Barkley will slot in after that. But, again, yes, you can have that running back that like an Isaiah Pacheco who was drafted in the 7th round, but he also has an elite quarterback in Patrick Mahomes who has the ability to put the team on his shoulders. Jimmy G doesn't have the ability to put his team on his shoulders, and Daniel Jones in New York clearly doesn't have the ability to put his team on his shoulders. They need guys like a Saquon. They need guys like a Josh Jacobs. And again, I'm not begrudging the Raiders for not coming to agreement on the contract extension. I get it. Again, I understand the business side of things. But when you use the argument that, well, these running backs won the Super Bowl and, they can do it without them, remember that most of those guys had really great quarterbacks that they were relying on as well, whereas the Raiders don't have that. And until we see them have a really strong defense, we don't know. We don't know what that defense is going to look like when it all comes together. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's true about that statement, but also you have to remember that there's levels to the game. And the level is, okay, if you're going to have a 7th-round pick or a 5th-round pick or just a running back, any running back, then you better have a trigger man that can really get it done. And right now, the Raiders have Jimmy G. And I don't consider him a trigger man that I know is going to get it done. He's a guy, as we've talked about, that you can count on to throw the ball about 20, maybe 25 times a game. You don't want him to go over that. You just don't. So, again, you want to have that leader in the clubhouse that's that strong running back like a Josh Jacobs. And, again, I expect the Raiders to have him this year, and then it'll be up to the Raiders and Josh Jacobs and company to figure out what they do moving forward. But, it's unfortunate that they weren't able to come to that agreement. I do appreciate the fact that it came close, right? It let it be known that Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels did appreciate what Josh Jacobs was able to do, and they do want him around. And Josh McDaniels has mentioned that plenty of times, how much he loves the guy, but it just wasn't able to come to the agreement that both sides felt comfortable with. So we'll see what happens. JJ will get $10 million this year. Again, that's nothing to shake a stick at. That's still a nice chunk of change. He was only supposed to make $8 million on the 5th-year option, so he's going to get even $2 million more than that. It's just not exactly what he was looking for. And, well, I mean, the Raiders are going to live with that this year, and then they'll get back to the drawing board. They can't do anything till following the season. So it's either the $10 million tag, and a lot of people say, well, what if he gets traded? Even then, if they were to trade him, guess what? That team that picks him up can still only pay him the $10 million on the tag. They cannot give him a contract extension till after the season is over. So it's $10 million or nothing for Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, Tony Pollard throughout the course of this year. And no tag signed by Saquon or Josh, so they can't get any fines by not showing up to training camp. And I expect neither one of those guys to be in training camp anytime soon. So on the 26th, when it opens up for the Raiders, I won't expect to see 8 out there. We'll see a lot of Zamir White. It's a good opportunity for him. See a lot of Britton Brown and other running backs. Don't expect to see any Josh Jacobs. What are your thoughts? Coming up in segment number 3, your calls and text straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. This is the Locked On Raiders podcast. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and text off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start things off with Raider Meatloaf. He's calling to talk about Josh Jacobs, the fact he didn't get extension, and what he thinks the Raiders need to do moving forward. Here he is, Raider Meatloaf.
Hey, what's up, Q? It's Raider Meatloaf here. With all the Josh Jacobs talk going on right now, if you think about it, if you look at the past and how running backs have been paid, they've been paid the highest when they're not on the team. I mean, you have the exceptions like Ezekiel Elliott, Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry in the 20th century. But outside of that, people get paid on other teams. If you look at the top 10 backs of all time, highest paid, I don't think Josh Jacobs reaches that. He's not somebody that's going to catch 100 passes. He'll scratch, 1,000 yards on the season, which is great. But at the same time, I think it's time to flip the page and move forward and start looking to the future. I know we got some running backs in the stable right now that are durable and ready to go, but at the same time, I think it's time to start moving forward and maybe sign somebody in free agency, maybe like Kareem Hunt, and see what we got going. So I just don't want this to be the topic and the downfall. Every team has their downfall, but it seems like every Raider season has a big downfall, and this is a captain, a leader, and it would be sad to see Jacobs go, but at the same time, I think it's time to turn the page. Carr's out. It feels like a new era of Raider football after Carr left. So, if it's time to flip the page, let's flip the page and move forward. Alrighty, take care.
Thank you for the call, my man. I appreciate you. And at some point, I'm sure the Raiders will move on or turn the page in your words. But I'm not going to say that time is right now. I don't think that time should be right now. As I mentioned in segment number 2, he was responsible for 33% of the Raiders' offense in 2022. Think about that. 33%. He was second in the league, only behind Derrick Henry. And you know how much Derrick Henry is relied on in Tennessee with the Titans. There's a reason why they had to go make a move for DeAndre Hopkins, because they had no offense behind Derrick Henry. The Raiders, even though they have Devontae Adams, still 33% of their offense came from Josh Jacobs in 2022, second in the league. So I don't think it's time to turn the page yet. I'm excited to see what happens with Josh Jacobs in 2023. Can he have a repeat performance? And I'm not necessarily saying 1,600-plus yards, but can he be up there in the top 2 of the NFL in rushing? I'd love to see that. And then at the end of the season, he can put that smile on his face, throw up his hands, and say, how you like me now, right? How you like me now, right? I mean, just because if you do it consistently, then there's not really a whole lot anyone could say. And even with that being said, there's still no guarantee that a long-term deal would get done. They might hit him with the franchise tag again. One won't know until we see what happens. But, again, I do believe he'll be ready to go. I know he keeps himself in good shape. I'm hoping that he gets to training camp maybe, a week or two before camp is actually breaks, so he can get a little bit of burn as far as, practice and just kind of getting his body prepared for the upcoming season. But, again, it's on him to show up, and he can't get any fines until he shows up and signs the tag. So that's a call from Raider Meatloaf. Definitely appreciate you. Next, got a text from Keegan in Vancouver. He said, what's up, Q? It's Keegan from Vancouver, Washington. I'm curious what the running back franchise tag will be when the higher-paid running backs retire. I'll leave that to the math wizards, but sounds like it's going to be around $9 million at the most. Love all the shows that you do, Q. Raiders. That's Keegan in Vancouver. And, yeah, unfortunately, that position, the franchise tag is just going down and down and down, right? At some point, and I mentioned this to Bill Barnwell when I was doing my radio show on Saturday on ESPN Radio, said, hey, man, is at some point, 5-10 years down the road that the running back position is not even a position we're talking about. It's just another player on the field that's an offensive weapon. Like, do they eliminate the name running back altogether because, well, it's just not the position that it used to be? And he said, I can see that 10 years from now. I can absolutely see it, right? But it's just wild to know that how much the running back used to be relied on, how much the bell cow used to be relied on, and to the point now it's, well, running back by committee. You can grab one in the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round, whatever the case may be. You don't need that guy that's that high-priced dude. It's not worth it. The analytics and the data don't back it up. It just shows how it was at one point to where it is now. It ain't the same. But thank you for that text, Keegan. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a call from Raider Mitch in the 513. He's calling to talk about the interview from Monday's show with former Raider running back Frank Hawkins.
Hey, Q. How you doing, man? This is Raider Mitch out of the 513. You're doing a great job as always, man. Just wanted to say that the conversation that you had with the old Raider running back Hawkins this morning, I listened to on your podcast, and that was right on point, what he said. I've been saying for the last couple of years, last 3 or 4 years, that everything is directed towards the quarterbacks in this league. And you're not going to win championship without a great defense. They're totally overlooking that. I don't like that when the committee, they got together in the off season here where the rule changes, and the first thing they brought up was looking at the quarterbacks. I think it was McVay from the Rams suggested that they, relook at the quarterback situation, and they said they didn't waste any time saying, oh, no, that's not going to change. So, I'm relatively a defensive guy. I like offense. It sells tickets and it's pretty. But this whole change of the league, disrespecting the running backs and everything else is just getting really to be disgusting. But hope the Raiders can have a good year this year. Supposedly me and the wife are supposed to be out for the Steelers game. And hope Jimmy G can stay healthy. Okay, go Raiders.
Raider Mitch, thanks for the call. Appreciate you. And, yeah, the running back position and defense absolutely needs more attention. Again, like I said in segment number 2, if you have an elite quarterback, maybe you don't need that big-time running back, right? It might not be needed as much. But if you have a mid-level quarterback, I think a strong running back is needed. It can be done, I believe, without that big-time elite running back. But, man, it sure does help in a major way. Hell, you see how big Christian McCaffrey was for the 49ers when they had all the quarterback troubles that they had in 2022, right? They still, made it to the championship game in the NFC, and, without some injuries to their quarterback, who knows what would have happened. But Christian McCaffrey looked like he was the move of the year by GM John Lynch, right, to go make that move for him because they needed that guy. Because, again, they had Jimmy G, then they had Brock Purdy. Trey Lance has been banged up so much. I mean, they're on quarterback like 18, but because they had that strong run game, obviously Christian McCaffrey and everyone else, Deebo Samuel playing a major role. Those strong running backs and guys that excel in the running game really help those quarterbacks kind of get comfortable and slide into a position. So thank you so much for that call, Mitch. I do appreciate you. And we'll wrap it up with a text from Brent from Boston. He says, hey, Q. Brent from Boston checking in and just want to weigh in on the Josh Jacobs situation, the running back market in general. While I'm disappointed they couldn't make it work, I understand why. The game has dramatically changed in the past decade, and more specifically since guys like Mahomes, Lamar, Allen, Hurts, Burrow, and Herbert, and the list goes on, have entered the league. Basically, these guys are and have that ability to improvise and create big plays on their own. The money that used to go to the bell cow running backs, goes to getting guys like this on the roster. The sad truth is we had the leading rusher in the league on our roster, and we still only won 6 games. It's not a knock on Jacobs. It just shows that it's where the value of the position is currently. If you take a deeper look at the rushing leaders since these young, improvising quarterbacks were drafted, you'll notice a trend. Josh Jacobs, 6 wins. Jonathan Taylor, 4 wins. King Henry, 7 wins. King Henry, 7 wins. Until a team consistently wins on the legs of their running back, this is the new NFL. This could be solved in the next CBA, but that's a long text for another time. Appreciate you, Q, and all you do for the nation. Just win, baby. Again, that's from Brent in Boston. And, I mean, yeah, that's the truth. But as I brought up in segment number 2, right, I mean, if you're going to have running back by committee or you're going to have a lower-level running back, you better have a really stinking good quarterback. And unfortunately, the Raiders have a mid-level quarterback, and while they do have the league's leading rusher, he's not currently on the roster, and who knows when he signs that tag and he actually shows up. It's really nice to have that security. A guy like Jimmy G really needs that security, similar to Daniel Jones in New York, needs that security of a Saquon Barkley. You can't just make up that production with just anybody, and that's not a diss or a knock on Zamir White. I think Zamir White's going to be good, but he's not Josh Jacobs. I think Brenton Brown has a chance to be good. He did some good things in college, but he's not Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs was the identity of the Raiders. He was the engine. He was the face of the team when they really didn't know what they were doing, didn't know what kind of team they were going to be, and didn't look like they knew what kind of team that they were going to be. He took that on his self to be that guy and really helped the Raiders a lot. And again, like you mentioned, they still only won 6 games. They blew a lot of leads late. They shouldn't have done that. Maybe Josh Jacobs should have been more of a role later in the game and salting the game away. Maybe they should have, stayed aggressive. I don't know. But I just know when the team needed an identity, Josh Jacobs was there to be that identity. So if you're going to have a mid-level quarterback, I think you need to have an elite running back. If you're going to have an elite running back, then maybe you don't need that strong quarterback. But if you're going to have a super strong quarterback, then maybe you don't need that elite running back. I kind of think that these things go hand in hand. It's similar to looking at the defensive line. If you have an elite pass rush, maybe your cornerbacks don't need to be top-notch. If you don't have an elite, pass rush, maybe you need to have cornerbacks that are just a little bit better, right? Of course, they all go hand in hand. They complement each other. But sometimes if you have one super strength, you got to use that super strength as opposed to the other if you don't have it. So thank you so much for that text. I do appreciate you. And that's going to do it for today's show. Obviously, a lot to do with Josh Jacobs and the contract situation. Now we wait. We wait. The training camp opens up on the 26th. That's the first day of practice. And I don't expect to see Josh Jacobs there at all. Maybe I'll be surprised. That'd be great. But if I don't, like I said, I wouldn't be shocked and don't know how much he needs a training camp. Hope he gets there to see and play and participate in a little bit, not necessarily preseason games, but just get a little bit of burn in camp and in practice so he can get ready for Denver the first week of the season. So that's all I got time for on today's show. Raider Nation, thanks so much for hitting us up with all the feedback on the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line. 707-654-4693. We'll have more calls and texts coming up on tomorrow's show, like PE from North Carolina's got a really good call. We'll get to that, plus a couple more texts. We'll do that, plus we'll have more news and notes. We'll have plenty of conversation here as we continue to navigate through the offseason and get closer and closer to the first day of practice on the 26th. So until then, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.